Peter's first day at the bustling neighborhood grocery store was anything but easy. As a young man with Down syndrome, he was determined to prove himself, even as he battled nervousness. But the day took a sharp turn when an irate customer started berating him with cruel words. The scene froze those around him, leaving Peter to face the humiliation alone. What no one realized was that among the onlookers stood a well-known Hollywood star, and his next move would stun everyone. Before diving deeper, let us know where you're tuning in from. If heartwarming stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow, we'll share another incredible tale that you won't want to miss. Peter, just 21 years old, was known for his kindness and determination despite the challenges he faced. He carried a warm energy that brightened any room, but his past held wounds that few could understand. Memories of his stepfather's harsh treatment lingered like shadows. In quick glimpses, Peter as a young boy sat silently while his stepfather hurled degrading words. "You'll never amount to anything, kid. Stop trying," the man's cold voice echoed in Peter's mind, leaving scars that were slow to heal. Yet Peter refused to let those words define him. Instead, he built resilience and vowed to prove his worth. The grocery store buzzed with activity. Rows of neatly arranged goods lined the aisles, and the soft hum of cartwheels set the rhythm of the day. Peter walked in proudly, donning his new uniform. Jack, the store manager, greeted him with a firm handshake and an encouraging smile. "Welcome to the team, Peter. We're glad to have you here." "Thank you, sir. I'll give it my best," Peter replied enthusiastically, his determination shining through. Peter dove into his tasks, learning everything from stocking shelves to bagging groceries. He paid close attention, eager to absorb every instruction. His co-workers noticed his positive attitude, though a few whispered behind his back. "He's a little slow, isn't he?" one murmured, unaware that Peter had heard. Ignoring the comment, Peter pressed on, determined to let his work speak for itself. By the end of his shift, Peter felt a mix of pride and exhaustion. Bagging the final customer's groceries, he glanced at the clock, relieved to see his shift nearly over. But the calm didn't last. Unbeknownst to Peter, a woman in line grew increasingly impatient. Her glare burned with frustration as she watched him work. The automatic doors slid open, announcing the arrival of Karen, a sharply dressed 45-year-old woman whose commanding presence seemed to fill the store. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiled floor as she marched down the aisle, exuding authority and dissatisfaction. Her scowl deepened as she approached the checkout line, and with a dramatic sigh, she stopped abruptly, her irritation plain for all to see. "These stores are never organized properly," Karen grumbled, her voice deliberately loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. Snatching a cart, she pushed it forward with force, navigating the aisles as if competing in a race. She hastily grabbed items, carelessly tossing them into the cart without a second glance. Anyone in her way, a child standing too close, or another shopper comparing prices, received an exasperated glare or a pointed sigh. When her cart was full, she headed to the checkout, scanning the lines with growing irritation. Though the wait wasn't long, to someone as impatient as Karen, it felt like an eternity. She chose Peter's line, her eyes narrowing as she observed him meticulously bagging items for another customer. His precise, unhurried movements drew her attention. "Are you kidding me?" she muttered, rolling her eyes. "How can someone this slow even work here?" she said under her breath. When it was finally her turn, Karen slammed her groceries onto the counter, shoving them toward Peter in a blatant display of frustration. He greeted her with a polite, "Good morning, Mom," his voice timid but warm. Karen responded with a frosty glare and a biting tone. "Let's hope it's good because I don't have all day." Peter began scanning her items, his hands steady as he double-checked barcodes and carefully packed each bag. Her piercing stare, however, bore into him, making the task feel 10 times harder. Her fingers tapped impatiently on the counter, punctuated by loud sighs. "How much longer is this going to take?" she demanded, leaning forward. "Honestly, it's like watching paint dry." Peter's face flushed as her words cut into him. He tried to work faster, but his shaky hands betrayed his nerves. A box slipped from his grip and tumbled to the floor. Karen scoffed loudly, throwing her hands up in exaggerated disbelief. "Oh, come on," she said, her voice sharp and mocking. "He can't even hold onto a box. This is ridiculous." Peter crouched to retrieve the fallen item, his breathing uneven. Karen crossed her arms and leaned closer, raising her voice further. "This is unacceptable. Why is someone this incompetent even here? Who hired you? Out of pity, I'm guessing." Her words landed like blows. Peter tried to focus, but his trembling hands only made him more self-conscious. From across the store, Jack, the manager, remained engrossed in another task, unaware of the commotion building at the register. Karen turned to the other shoppers, seeking their agreement. "Can you believe this?" she said, gesturing dramatically. "This is supposed to be a fast lane, and he's anything but fast." Her mockery earned a few murmurs of disapproval, but most people avoided her gaze. The humiliation mounted for Peter. Another bag slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a loud thud. Karen laughed sarcastically, her tone cutting. "Look at that! He can't even handle a bag. It's pathetic." Peter's breathing quickened as his face burned with shame. Memories from his childhood surfaced. His stepfather's scathing words echoed in his mind. "You'll never amount to anything," the voice sneered. "You're useless." Shaking off the memory, Peter whispered to himself, barely audible, "I just want to do my job." But Karen wasn't finished. She leaned in even closer, pointing her finger at him like scolding a child. "Someone needs to show you how to do real work. You're wasting everyone's time." Her voice rang out, cutting through the buzz of the store and pulling the attention of shoppers from nearby aisles. Some people waiting in line exchanged hushed comments. A few nodded subtly, seeming to agree, while others visibly squirmed at the scene. Several customers instinctively reached for their phones, recording the unfolding drama. Peter opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His eyes brimmed with tears, though he desperately tried to hold them back. The sharp sound of footsteps approaching broke the tension, drawing every gaze toward the source. Karen, still locked in her tirade at Peter, paused briefly as someone finally decided to step forward. A heavy silence settled over the store. The usual background noise of cashiers chatting, carts rolling and shoppers chattering was swallowed by the uneasy atmosphere. All eyes were now fixed on the checkout lane, where Karen gestured wildly, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "This is a complete waste of my time," she snapped, throwing her hands up dramatically. "I can't believe I'm dealing with this," she barked while the rest of the line avoided her gaze, glued instead to their phones or the floor. An older woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Isn't anyone going to step in? That poor kid looks so lost." Her husband gave a small shrug. "I don't know. We don't want to make things worse, do we?" Meanwhile, Karen seemed oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. Her indignation burned hotter, her voice rising, while Peter's composure seemed to slip further. The store, once a welcoming space, now felt suffocating to Peter. He scanned the faces around him, seeing a blend of judgment, pity, and detachment. The bright fluorescent lights above only added to his disorientation, making the situation feel even more overwhelming. Karen's rant continued, each word more cutting than the last, aimed as much at the audience as at Peter. "This is the service we're paying for? Seriously? He's far too slow? This is unacceptable." The tension in the air felt almost physical, pressing down on everyone. Some shoppers tried to pretend it wasn't happening, while others stole uneasy glances between Karen and Peter, silently hoping someone else would step up. Peter, struggling to keep going, finally found the courage to speak, though his voice trembled and was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm doing my best." Karen spun toward him, leaning over the counter with a glare that could cut through steel. "Trying isn't enough," she sneered. "Not for this job. People have places to be, and you're wasting everyone's time." Peter looked down, unable to respond. His shaky hands fumbled, and another bag slipped to the floor with a loud thud. The sound seemed to echo, amplifying his shame. Karen let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Wow, he can't even hold a bag. This is pathetic," she said, shaking her head. A few customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. A younger man near the middle of the line hesitated, then began recording on his phone. "And this is so bad," he muttered to the woman beside him. "But who's going to stop her?" She shifted uncomfortably and whispered back, "She's so aggressive. I don't want to get involved." At the back of the line, an older woman seemed to be gathering her courage. She adjusted her purse and took a tentative step forward but hesitated, her gaze full of sympathy as she looked at Peter. The choice to act felt like a heavy weight she wasn't sure she could bear. Karen, emboldened by the lack of pushback, doubled down. "If you can't handle this job," she said even louder, "then go find something else. Somebody has to say it." Peter's hands were slick with sweat as he focused on his task, avoiding her glare. His chest felt tight, and he struggled to take calming breaths. Across the store, Jack, the manager, finally noticed something was off. He glanced toward the commotion at Peter's lane, but was too far to hear what was happening. As he started to walk over, a customer stopped him with a question. Meanwhile, Karen kept going, turning to the other shoppers for validation. "Can you believe this? We're all being held up because of him. It's ridiculous they'd put someone like this on the express lane," she exclaimed. The murmurs among the customers grew louder, but still, no one dared to speak up. Each moment seemed to stretch out endlessly, and the tension was almost suffocating. Nearby, partially hidden behind the shelves, a man stood quietly observing the scene. His stance was relaxed, but his face revealed little emotion. Dressed plainly, he blended seamlessly with the crowd, yet his eyes stayed locked on the situation. He crossed his arms and tilted his head slightly, studying every movement with a sense of deliberate focus. There was no shock in his expression, just a composed awareness, as though he had witnessed something similar before. Peter remained absorbed in his work, unaware of the man's presence, though he could feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the overwhelming weight of the moment might soon be counterbalanced by some unseen force. Karen, however, was entirely oblivious. Her attention stayed fixed on Peter, her irritation growing louder with every passing second. The market buzzed with murmurs as the tension climbed. Customers shuffled uncomfortably, their frustration simmering just beneath the surface. Still, no one made a move to intervene. The man, standing silently, stepped forward, becoming more noticeable to the waiting customers. His eyes focused sharply on Karen, and he seemed to be calculating the precise moment to intervene. The shift in energy was palpable, and some people began to notice him, sensing that something significant was about to occur. Peter, still overwhelmed, briefly glanced up and met the man's gaze. Though brief, the exchange carried an unspoken reassurance, a calm resolve that seemed to cut through the chaos, even if Peter didn't fully understand it. Karen's voice began to rise again, her anger unchecked. It was then that the man took another step forward and the market collectively held its breath. Karen's heated gestures and impatient tone reached their peak. Peter's hands shook as he tried to stay composed, but the pressure was paralyzing. The customers' silent stares bore down on him, amplifying his vulnerability. Then, out of nowhere, a firm yet calm voice broke the tension like a sharp blade slicing through thick fog. "That's enough!" The words rippled through the market, carrying authority and a strange sense of peace. Everyone froze, scanning the crowd to find the source. Karen stiffened, startled by the sudden confrontation. Across the aisle, a tall figure moved forward with an air of quiet confidence. His pace was steady, deliberate, and magnetic. "Who is that?" a woman whispered, leaning closer to get a better view. "Wait, is that him?" a younger man murmured, already holding up his phone to record. Keanu Reeves stepped into full view. Dressed simply in a casual shirt and plain pants, he might have gone unnoticed in a different setting. But at this moment, his presence was undeniable. Karen's expression shifted, a mix of irritation and uncertainty. She turned toward him, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, so you think you can just show up and tell me what to do?" Her voice held a note of defiance, though it was tinged with unease. Keanu stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady but kind. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "I'm saying what you're doing is wrong." Karen blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Wrong? You don't even know what's going on here." "I'm simply stating the facts. This boy is slowing everyone down." Keanu's lips curved into a faint smile, though the sharp determination in his eyes stayed firm. "The facts," Keanu countered. "The real fact is, he's doing his job, and you've chosen to embarrass him for it. There's a difference between pointing out facts and using them to tear someone down." The murmurs among the customers grew louder, but now their focus shifted toward Karen rather than Peter. Peter stood motionless behind the counter, staring at Keanu with wide, unsure eyes. He couldn't quite grasp why this stranger was stepping in, but relief washed over him, as if someone had finally understood his silent cry for help. Keanu took a step closer to Peter, his gaze softening. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, his voice steady and encouraging. Peter, the young man stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded. "Peter, you're doing a fantastic job. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." He placed a firm but gentle hand on Peter's shoulder, as if passing along some of his confidence. "We all have tough moments, but those don't define who we are. You get that, right?" Peter slowly nodded, his eyes welling up. Words escaped him, but the crushing weight he'd felt moments ago now felt a little lighter. Karen crossed her arms, letting out a short, uncomfortable laugh. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this isn't about you. I just want fast service, and he clearly can't handle it." Keanu turned to her, his expression growing serious. "I'm someone who values respect. Kindness costs nothing, but you've forgotten that." Karen scoffed, her voice losing its sharpness. "I have the right to be upset. This is a waste of my time." "You do have the right to feel frustrated," Keanu replied with a calm nod. "What you don't have is the right to lash out at someone who doesn't deserve it, especially someone working to help." The murmurs among the crowd turned into open agreement. A woman in the line raised her voice. "He's right. It's not okay to treat the kid like that." Another chimed in. "We're all waiting. No one else is complaining. Why should you be any different?" The support for Keanu spread quickly. Karen glanced around, realizing the crowd wasn't on her side. Instead, she faced a sea of disapproving looks. The customers began nodding, some recording the exchange on their phones. The atmosphere in the market shifted. What started as a moment of humiliation became a display of solidarity. Before leaving, Keanu turned back to Peter. "Keep being yourself," he said with a warm smile. "You're already more than enough." As Keanu exited the market, the crowd broke into applause. For Peter, the moment felt transformative. Looking at the line, he saw kind, supportive faces. For the first time in a long time, he felt he truly mattered. Karen's heels clicked against the floor as she walked out, the sound fading as the automatic doors closed behind her. A brief silence followed, broken by murmured conversations. "She had no right to treat him that way," an older woman said to her neighbor. "What a moment!" "Can you believe it was Keanu Reeves?" another customer added, still stunned. While the crowd buzzed with excitement, Peter stood at the counter, lost in thought. His gaze dropped to his hands as he tried to process how a moment of shame had turned into something empowering. Jack, the market manager, finally arrived, resting a hand on Peter's shoulder. "You okay, Peter?" he asked sincerely. Peter looked up at Jack and managed a small, grateful smile. "Yes, I'm fine." There was a shift in his tone, a newfound confidence that hadn't been there before. Keanu's words echoed in Peter's mind. "Your worth isn't defined by how fast you bag groceries. It's about who you are." Taking a deep breath, Peter felt as though he was shedding a burden he had carried for years. Back at work, something remarkable began to unfold. Customers in line treated Peter with warmth and respect. A woman handed him her items with a genuine smile. "You're doing an amazing job, Peter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," she said. An older man chimed in as well. "Keep it up, son. You've got more bravery than most people out there." These simple yet heartfelt comments felt like bricks, slowly rebuilding Peter's self-esteem. The market's atmosphere transformed. What once was just a grocery store now felt like a community. Shoppers began chatting with one another, many praising Peter or sharing their thoughts on small acts of kindness. A young woman holding her phone approached Jack, her voice full of excitement. "That was incredible. Did you see how he handled it all? This needs to go on social media. People should hear Peter's story." Jack nodded, smiling. "I agree, but what matters most is that Peter knows how extraordinary he is." Suddenly, the market didn't just feel like a place to shop. It felt like a gathering of friends. Those who had been strangers only moments ago now conversed like old acquaintances. When Peter's shift finally ended, he walked slowly to the locker room, lost in thought. Sitting on the bench, he stared at his uniform. For so long, he had believed he was invisible, defined only by his mistakes or differences, but today was different. Keanu's words had sparked something inside him. Pride, a belief in his own worth. He thought of his mum's words from that morning, reminding him how much he meant to their family. For the first time, he started to believe her. Outside, Keanu Reeves calmly walked toward his car. He wasn't looking for applause or recognition. For him, this was just another moment of doing what felt right. Before getting into the car, he glanced back at the market, a small smile on his face. He knew this wasn't about him. It was about Peter and the ripple effect of one simple act of kindness. The next day, the story began to spread. A video of Keanu standing up for Peter went viral, capturing the hearts of millions worldwide. Hashtags like "Giant Respect for Peter" and "Kindness Matters" trended, drawing attention to the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Those who had been at the market shared their first-hand accounts, inspiring countless others to recognize the power of small, compassionate gestures. Peter, who once feared standing out, became a symbol of resilience and inner strength. The narrator closed the story with an important reminder. Every day, we are given the chance to choose kindness. A small act can transform someone's life, creating a ripple effect of positivity. We all play a part in building a world where empathy and respect are the norm. The next morning, as Peter walked to the market, he felt lighter. The harsh words that once weighed him down had been replaced by encouragement and support. Entering the store, he was greeted with warm smiles and friendly words from the customers in line. Smiling back, Peter finally felt like he belonged. In that moment, he knew he would never feel invisible again. If you loved this story, there's more to discover. Click to explore heartwarming tales of hope, compassion, and resilience.